The Xeno survey vessel Astraeus hung in the silent dark just beyond the outer rim of charted space. Its hull scarred by micrometeorites and time, its crew weary from months of scanning dead rocks and empty voids. They had been sent to the fringe, not for glory but for caution. A routine sweep of Sector K7XA world marked in red on every galactic map as a Deathworld toxic atmosphere, crushing gravity storms that ripped satellites from orbit and fried sensors with raw electromagnetic fury. No life should have survived there, and yet something had moved. Lieutenant Cassie Moore stood in the observation blister, her gloved hands pressed against the cool transparasteel as she watched the planet below. It was a swirl of ash and violet, lightening a place that seemed to breathe anger with every rotation. She was not supposed to feel anything for it but duty. Yet something about K7X tugged at her like a half-remembered dream. She was 29 standard years old, with short, brown hair tucked under her cap and eyes that had seen too many empty worlds but never one that watched back behind her. Commander Elias Voss entered the chamber, his heavy boots thudding on the deck. He was a career officer with a reputation for clean extractions and zero tolerance for sentimentality. He carried a data slate in one hand and a frown in the other. Thermal scans confirm it, he said without greeting, movement consistent with bipedal locomotion, low heat signature but steady, intelligent, patterns not animal, not machine. Cassie did not turn still, staring down at the churning clouds below. They said no one could live there. They were wrong, he replied flatly. And now we have to find out why. The orders came an hour later. A surface drop. Pod would be deployed at 0200 Standard Time, minimal crew. 2 human observers and 2 Cathari Marines. The mission was clear. Observe document. Do not engage. Do not contaminate. Do not die. Cassie suited up in the prep bay, her exosuit clicking into place with familiar precision. The Cathari Marines stood nearby, their chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh lights. They were tall insectoid beings with 4 arms and compound eyes that never blinked. Their names were unpronounceable, so the crew called them Rick and Jin out of habit. Not respect, they checked their pulse rifles with mechanical efficiency. Neither spoke standard galactic, but their body language said enough. They did not want to be here. Commander Voss stood by the pod. Hatch, his arms crossed. You go down, you scan, you come back in 10 minutes, no more. If anything moves, you retreat immediately. No heroics. Cassie nodded but said nothing. She knew better than to argue with Voss in front of the team, but she also knew that 10 minutes would not be enough. Not for a world that had hidden life for centuries. The pod detached with a soft hiss and dropped into the storm. Gravity hit like a hammer the moment they breached the upper atmosphere. The pod groaned under the strain, its stabilizers whining as they fought to keep it level. Cassie gripped her harness tight, her heart pounding not from fear, but from anticipation. This was it. The moment every xenobiologist dreamed of and dreaded: first contact with the unknown. Outside, lightning forked across the sky, purple and white. Tearing through clouds of sulfur and ash, the air was thick enough to chew, and the ground below glowed faintly with patches of blue-green moss that pulsed like slow heartbeats at 0200 exactly. The pod slammed into a clearing, its landing strut sinking slightly into the soft earth. The hatch cycled open with a puff of steam, and the team stepped out, weapons ready. Silence. The storm had stopped. Not faded, not weakened, but stopped, as if someone had flipped a switch. The air hung heavy and still. The only sound was the soft crunch of boots on moss and the hum of the Cathari rifles powering up. Cassie scanned the area with her visor-enhanced vision. Nothing moved. No animals, no drones, no structures. Just endless forest of black twisted trees and glowing ground cover. The air smelled of ozone and something else. Something sweet and sharp like burnt honey. Then she saw her 20 meters ahead. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a girl. She was barefoot, her feet pale against the moss. Her skin fair, almost luminous in the dim light. She wore a tunic of woven bark and sinew that shimmered with every breath. Her hair fell past her waist in a cascade of silver white that seemed to move on. Its own, not from wind, but from something deeper, something alive. And beside her, coiled like living smoke, was a creature, no larger than a wolf, but built like a myth. Its body covered in scales that shifted color from deep indigo to molten gold. With every breath its wings were folded tight against its back, but even closed they hummed with restrained energy. Its eyes glowed amber and fixed on the intruders with calm intelligence. A dragon, not the fire-breathing beasts of old Earth legends, but something older. Something real. Cassie raised her hand, signaling the team to hold position. Her breath caught in her throat. She had studied xenobiology for over a decade. She had seen alien life in every form, but never like this. Never so still. So aware, so undeniably sentient. The girl did not move, she simply watched. Then she smiled. It was not a wide smile, not a threatening one. Just a small, gentle curve of her lips that somehow carried more weight than any roar at, "Oh, 201. The girl tilted, her head slightly as if listening to a sound only she could hear. "Oh, 202. The dragon uncoiled, rising to its full height, its wings unfolding just enough to catch the faint light. Its tail flicked, once slow, deliberate at, "Oh, 203. The ground beneath the pod cracked open with a low groan. Not from impact, but from within the earth itself. Thick roots tore through the soil and moss, revealing tunnels lined with eyes. Dozens of them blinking in unison. Pale amber eyes. Just like the girls, the Thari Marines spun around, rifles raised, but before they could fire, the moss beneath their feet surged upward, wrapping around their legs with vine-like speed. One of them fired a pulse shot, but the beam was absorbed by the glowing ground as if swallowed by water. Cassie shouted retreat, but her voice was lost in the sudden rush of movement. The forest came alive, not with sound, but with presence. Every tree, every patch of moss, every shadow seemed to lean in. Watching, waiting, the girl did not move. She only watched Cassie, her smile never fading. At 0204. The first Cathari Marine was gone, pulled into the earth with a muffled cry. His armor left behind cracked and steaming as if something inside had unraveled its very atoms. The second Marine backed away, firing wildly, but the pulses did nothing. The dragon leapt not at him but above him, circling once, then landing silently between the team and the girl. Its eyes locked on Cassie, not with malice, but with something like curiosity. Voss' voice crackled over the comm, "More, get out now." That was not a request. Cassie grabbed the remaining Marine and dragged him toward the pod. Her heart hammering not from fear of death, but from the terrifying realization that they had been studied long before they arrived, that this world had let them land, that the girl had allowed them to see her as they scrambled into the pod. The hatch sealed just as the ground surged again, roots slamming against the metal like fists. Back. In orbit, the Astreus shuddered as the pod docked. Emergency protocols flared red across every console. The second Cathari Marine was in shock. His armor scorched his skin, pale and clammy. He kept muttering in his native tongue over and over, "Apex. Apex, Apex." Cassie removed her helmet, her hands trembling not from cold but from awe. She replayed the encounter in her mind, every second, every detail. The girl had not attacked. She had shown them, and in that showing she had delivered a message clearer than any weapon. "You are not the hunters here. You are the intruders, and we have been waiting." Commander Voss stormed into the debrief room. His face grim scans show massive subterranean activity. Entire networks beneath the crust cities, maybe power sources, organic alloy signatures off the scale. Cassie sat quietly, her mind racing. "They knew we were coming. Maybe they always know," he said grimly. "They let us land. They let us see her. They wanted us to run back and tell the council what they saw." Why, she asked. "Because fear is a weapon," he replied, "and they just used it perfectly." But Cassie was not afraid, not anymore. She had seen the smile, the calm, the intelligence behind those amber eyes. This was not a mindless predator. This was something else, something ancient. And patient as she walked back to her quarters, she glanced out the viewport at the swirling planet below. And for the first time in her career, she did not see a death world. She saw a home, and somewhere down there, a girl with silver hair and a dragon. At her side was watching the stars, wondering if the visitors would return, and if they did, whether they would come as enemies or as something new. Cassie made a silent promise to herself she would find out, not as a soldier, but as a witness. Because in that quiet moment at 0201, when the Deathworlder girl smiled, the universe had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. The Astraeus drifted in uneasy silence, orbiting the death world like a thief circling a sleeping giant. Every system hummed with tension. The crew moved quietly, speaking in hushed tones as if the planet below could hear them through the vacuum of... Space Commander Voss had locked down all non-essential communications and doubled the watch on the science bay. The loss of one Cathari Marine weighed heavily, not just as a casualty, but as a mystery. His armor had been recovered, but his body was gone, not torn, not burned, but simply absent, as if erased from existence at the molecular level. Cassie Moore sat alone in the xenobiology lab, reviewing the surface footage for the 7th time. The image of the silver-haired girl lingered on her screen, frozen at the exact moment she smiled. It was not a smile of aggression or mockery. It was calm, almost gentle, and that made it more unsettling than any snarl could have been beside her. The recovered armor lay on a diagnostic table, its surface pitted with strange fractal patterns that pulsed faintly under ultraviolet light. She tapped a command and the footage advanced frame by frame at 0203. The ground cracked open, not randomly but in perfect symmetry, like a flower blooming. In reverse, the roots that emerged moved with purpose, not chaos. They had targeted the Cathari Marine with surgical precision, ignoring Cassie and the others, as if they were irrelevant. That was the key, she realized aloud. They chose who to take. Before she could pursue the thought further, an alert chimed softly on her console. New thermal readings from the surface, not movement this time, but structure. Vast networks of heat signatures deep beneath the crust, forming geometric patterns. Too regular. To be natural, the planet was not just inhabited, it was engineered. She called Voss immediately. He arrived within minutes, his face grim as he studied the data. "You are sure positive?" she replied. "This is not a colony. This is a civilization." "And it is." Voss rubbed his temples. "We report this. The Council will declare it a Tier 1 threat, full quarantine, maybe even sterilization." Cassie shook her head. "They did not attack us. They showed us something on purpose, or they were testing us." He countered. "They wanted to see how we react to fear." "Maybe," she said, "but they let us leave. That means something." Before Voss could respond, the ship shuddered slightly. Not from impact, but from a resonance pulse. A low-frequency vibration that traveled through the hull and into the bones of everyone aboard. Alarms blared, then cut off just as suddenly. The lights flickered once, then returned to normal on the main view screen. The planet below pulsed with a soft silver light, the moss fields glowing in unison, like a single organism breathing. Then a voice filled the bridge. It was soft, melodic, and spoken in perfect standard galactic tongue. "You took one of our..." Every officer froze. The voice came, not through comms, not through external sensors, but through the ship's internal speakers, as if it had grown inside the walls themselves. "Return her and we will speak." The voice belonged to the girl. Cassie's blood ran cold. She replayed the drop pod log, scanning every second of surface activity. Nothing indicated they had taken anything. The team had not touched the ground beyond stepping on it. They had not collected samples beyond the automated air and soil intakes. Or had they? She rushed to the sample bay, bypassing protocols with her clearance. Code the automated collector had activated during landing as standard procedure gathering. Atmospheric particulates, surface organics, and loose debris from the immediate landing zone. Inside the sealed biochamber, nestled among ash and moss fragments, was a small, curled form, a child. No older than 5 by human standards, but with the same silver-white hair and faint amber glow in her closed eyes. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow, her skin cool to the thermal scanner, but alive. They had not kidnapped her on purpose. They had scooped her up by accident, mistaking her for part of the landscape. And now the girl, the guardian, the mother, was waiting for her return. Voss entered the bay behind her, his expression unreadable. "We have to contain this," he said. "If the Council finds out we brought a live specimen on board, they will order immediate termination." Cassie turned to him, her voice low but firm. "She is not a specimen, she is a child. She is a Deathworlder," he snapped. "And her species just dissolved one of my Marines." "No," she corrected. "They dissolved the armor, not the man. Maybe he is still alive somewhere down there. Maybe they took him to study him, just like we study alien life." Voss stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "What? Do you propose? I go back? She said alone. No weapons. No team, just me and the child. I return her and I talk to the girl. That is suicide, maybe, she said. But it is also the only chance we have to avoid a worm. And while the dragon Ember, as the crew had begun, calling it, circled the ship, not attacking, not scanning, just watching its wings catching the starlight. Its body shifting colors in slow waves like a living aurora. Sensors showed it emitted no heat, no radiation, no energy signature at all, yet it flew effortlessly through the planet's violent upper atmosphere as if the storms obeyed it. Cassie prepared the shuttle herself, loading medical supplies, nutrient paste, and a thermal blanket. She wrapped the child, gently securing her in a padded carrier. The girl stirred once, letting out a soft whimper that sounded like wind through reeds, as Cassie powered up the shuttle. Voss stood at the airlock, his arms crossed. You have 1 hour if you are not back. We assume worst case and initiate full withdrawal. She nodded, understanding the unspoken threat. If she failed, the Council would send a fleet, and this time they would not send scientists. The descent was smoother. This time, the storm parted as the shuttle approached, as if the planet recognized her intent. The landing struts touched down in the same clearing, the moss glowing brighter beneath her feet. The girl stood in the same spot as before, her hands at her sides, her expression unreadable. Ember hovered just behind her wings, half spread, eyes fixed on the shuttle. Cassie stepped out slowly, holding the carrier in front of her like an offering. The air was still warm and thick with the scent of ozone, and that same sweet, sharp honey-like smelly. I did not know, she said, her voice steady. We thought she was part of the ground. The girl said nothing but stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the moss. She reached out, not for the carrier, but for Cassie's hand. Her touch was cool, dry, and carried a faint vibration like a distant human. That instant, Cassie saw flashes not with her eyes but in her mind. A city carved into the planet's mantle. Rivers of liquid light, flowing through caverns older than stars. Beings moving in harmony with the earth. Not ruling it, but belonging to. The girl withdrew her hand and took the carrier, gently lifting the child into her arms. The little one stirred, opening her eyes just enough to see her guardian, before nestling close. Her name is Naya. The girl said finally, her voice softer than before. She is my sister, not my daughter. We age slowly. Your time means little to us. Cassie swallowed hard. Why hide? Because your kind burns. What it does not understand. The girl replied, you call this a death world. We call it home. You call us monsters. We call you invaders. But then she studied Cassie, her amber eyes searching. Yours is different. You returned her without demand, without weapon. Cassie nodded, because she deserved to come home. The girl's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then, perhaps not all of you are fire at that moment. The shuttle's comm crackled to life. Voss' voice sharp with urgency. More, get back now. The Council has authorized extinction protocol. Orbital strike in 30 minutes. Cassie's heart sank. She looked at the girl, at Naya, at Ember, who now growled low in its throat, its scales darkening to black. I am not leaving, she said into the comm. You will die. She heard Voss say, maybe, she replied, but I will not let them burn this place without witness. The girl watched her silently, then nodded once as if she understood. Above them the sky began to ripple, not with storm but with the approach of warships, their engines humming with destructive purpose, and far below in the glowing tunnels of the earth, something ancient began to wake. Cassie stood in the clearing, her boots sinking slightly into the glowing moss, the air thick with the scent of ozone and something older. Something like stone warmed by sunlight. Even though no sun had touched this place in hours, above the sky darkened. Not from clouds, but from the arrival of warships, their hulls sleek and sharp like blades cutting through the atmosphere. The Council had moved faster than she expected. Extinction protocol meant no negotiation, no warning, just fire from orbit, until nothing remained but glass and silence. The girl Lyra, as she had finally given her name, held Naya close, her silver hair stirring in a wind that did not exist. Ember coiled around her feet, its scales shifting from black to deep crimson, its eyes fixed on the sky, not with fear but with readiness. You should go, Lyra said, her voice calm, even as the first orbital lance charged in the distance. A low hum building like thunder trapped in a bottle. Cassie shook her head. I will not leave you. To burn you are not one of us. "But I am here," she replied, "and that means something." Lyra studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if accepting a truth she had long suspected. "You see with your heart, not just your eyes, that is rare among your kind." The ground trembled slightly, not from the approaching strike but from within the planet itself. The moss pulsed brighter. The trees straightened as if bracing for impact. Deep below, the tunnels hummed with energy, a resonance that traveled through rock and root and bone. Cassie activated her suit comm. Not to call for rescue, but to broadcast. She patched into every open channel in the sector, overriding military encryption with an emergency override code she had memorized years ago for situations exactly like this. "This is Lieutenant Cassie Moore of the Xeno survey vessel Astraeus," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You are not witnessing a threat. You are witnessing a genocide. These people are not monsters. They are protectors. And if you destroy them, you prove you are the real Deathworlders." She transmitted the surface footage. The thermal scans, the voice log of Lyra speaking in perfect standard tongue. She sent it all raw. Unedited, no commentary, just truth on the bridge of the Astraeus. Commander Voss stared at his console as Cassie's message flooded every channel. Freighters, research stations, even rival fleets received it. The Council would be furious, but it was too late. The truth was out. Meanwhile, the first strike hid a beam of white-hot plasma lanced down from orbit, striking the clearing where Cassie and Lyra stood. But instead of explosion, there was absorption. The moss flared blindingly bright, then spread outward like liquid light, swallowing the energy, converting it into raw biomass. Within seconds, the scorched earth bloomed with new growth vines curling skyward, flowers unfolding in hues no human eye had ever seen. The air shimmered with released spores that glittered like stardust. Lyra raised her arms, not in defense but in welcome. "You burn to destroy," she called to the sky. "We burn to create." Ember launched into the air, not as a weapon but as a messenger, its wings trailing bioluminescent particles that carried more than light. They carried memory. The spores released by the dragon were not toxic. They were empathic, each one a tiny vessel of experience showing those who inhaled them. The cities beneath the crust, the songs of the people, the way they healed the wounded earth after every storm, and the Astraeus. A junior technician gasped as a spore drifted through an open vent. He touched his temple, tears welling in his eyes. "I see them," he whispered. "They are not monsters. They are mothers." On a nearby freighter, a Kthari cargo master dropped his tools, his compound eyes wide with sudden understanding. His species had once faced extinction too, and someone had chosen mercy. Even Voss felt it, a warmth in his chest, a memory not his own of holding a child under twin moons of a world he had never visited. But not all were moved. The Kthari dreadnought, loyal to the Council's old guard, powered its main cannon, ignoring the broadcast. Ignoring the spores, it would finish what the first strike began. Lyra watched it come, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Cassie. "You asked why we hide," she said softly. "It is not because we are weak. It is because we are strong enough to wait." Cassie frowned. "What do you mean?" "We do not fight to kill," she explained. "We fight to teach," as if on cue. The ground beneath them opened, not violently but gently, like a door welcoming guests. Lyra stepped forward, beckoning Cassie to follow. "You do not have to come," she said. "But if you stay, you will see what your people refuse to believe." Cassie looked up at the dreadnought, its cannon glowing with lethal charge, then back at Lyra, at Naya, who now watched her with curious eyes. She stepped into the tunnel. The walls were smooth, warm, pulsing with soft light. Veins of liquid energy ran through the stone like rivers feeding the city below. The air smelled of rain and iron and something sweet like crushed herbs. They walked in silence for what felt like hours but could have been minutes. Time moved differently. Here finally they emerged into a vast cavern so large its ceiling vanished into mist. Above, bioluminescent trees grew in spirals around crystalline towers, their leaves chiming softly in an unfelt breeze. Beings moved among them, not in haste, but in harmony. Some tending to glowing plants, others weaving light into fabric, others simply sitting in quiet contemplation. "This is home," Lyra said. Cassie could only stare. It was more beautiful than any human city, more alive than any habitat she had ever seen. Why show me this? Because you chose to see, she replied, above them the dreadnought fired. The beam tore through the upper crust aimed directly at the heart of the city. But before it could strike, Ember met it mid-air. The dragon did not block the blast. It absorbed it, its body flaring with unbearable brightness. Then it turned and dove not into the ground but into the dreadnought itself, phasing through the hull like mist reforming inside the ship's core. What happened next was not destruction but transformation. The dreadnought's weapons powered down. Its engines shifted frequency. Its cold metal warmed and softened. Vines burst through its corridors. Its command deck bloomed with flowers. Its weapons bay filled with nesting moss and soft light. The crew awoke not to alarms but to birdsong. The bridge the captain stared at his hands now dusted with pollen. His tactical display replaced by a map of growing roots and flowing light. "What is this?" he whispered. Peace, came the voice of Ember. Not in words but in feeling. Back in the cavern Lyra placed a hand on Cassie's shoulder. "The storm is passing." Cassie looked around at the people of K7X. They were not celebrating. They were not even looking up. They simply continued their lives as if they had known all along that fire could be turned to flower. "How did you do that?" "We do not resist," she said. "We transform. Your kind sees a weapon and builds a shield. We see a weapon and ask why it was made. Then we heal the hand that held it." Cassie thought of her own world of wars fought over land, and belief of ships sent to burn what they did not understand. "Is there hope for us?" she asked. Lyra smiled, that same quiet smile from 0201. "There is always hope," she said, "as long as someone is willing to return the child." And in that moment, Cassie understood the true meaning of Apex. It was not about strength or speed or fire. It was about the choice to spare, to teach to wait, and far above in the silent dark, the dreadnought drifted not as a warship, but as a seed, carrying the first fragile roots of a new covenant between stars. The dreadnought hung in orbit, no longer a weapon but a wonder. Its once cold hull now warm with life vines curled around its thrusters, its viewports blooming with soft blue flowers inside. The crew moved slowly, dazed not by injury, but by revelation. They had come to destroy and instead had been given a gift. The spores carried by Ember had settled in their lungs, their minds, their hearts, showing them not just the death world, but the truth behind it. A world not of death, but of deep life. A place that healed itself and those who learned to listen. On the Astraeus, Commander Voss stood alone on the bridge, his hands gripping the edge of the command console. His face unreadable. The broadcast from Cassie had spread like wildfire across the sector. Every ship within range had received it, and many had changed course, not toward battle, but toward witness. Freighters powered down their engines. Research vessels opened their observation decks. Even a rival syndicate cruiser halted its weapons array and sent a simple message we see Voss had spent his life believing. Strength meant control. That order required force. But now he watched as a planet turned fire into flower, and a dragon turned war into peace. And he felt something unfamiliar: doubt. Not in his mission, but in the system that sent him. He opened a private channel to the council. His voice low but firm. "The extinction protocol is a mistake. These people are not a threat. They are a mirror." The response was immediate and cold. "Voss, you are relieved of command. Stand down or be treated as hostile." He looked at the screen, then at the planet below where Cassie had chosen to stay, where a girl with silver hair had smiled at 0201 and changed everything. He made his choice. "All units," he said over ship-wide comm, "stand down, weapons offline, shields down. We are not here to fight, we are here to learn." On the surface, Cassie walked beside Lyra through the upper tunnels, the air cool and humming with quiet energy. Naya skipped ahead, her small feet barely making a sound. Ember followed like a shadow, its wings folded but its eyes watchfully. "You did not have to stay," Lyra said, glancing at her. Cassie shook her head. "I did not have a choice once I saw the truth." "Truth is not always enough," Lyra replied. "Many see it and still choose fire, but some do not," Cassie said, "and that is where hope begins." They reached a wide ledge overlooking a deep chasm below. Rivers of liquid light flowed through the rock, feeding vast gardens that climbed the walls in spirals of color and sound. This was the heart of the city, not a throne room, not a fortress, but a living network, where every being contributed to the whole. Lyra stopped and turned to her. "We must prepare for what comes next," Lyra said. "Your people will not all accept what they have seen. Some will call it trickery. Some will fear what they do not understand, and fear breeds violence." Cassie nodded. "They will send more ships," yes, Lyra said. "But this time we will not hide." Ember let out a low hum, its scales shifting to a deep gold. "The color of dawn. What will you do? Will show them." She said, "Not with weapons, but with truth again and again, until they understand that we are not their enemy. We are their reflection." Meanwhile, in orbit, the council convened an emergency session. Cassie's broadcast had fractured their unity. Some members demanded immediate reinforcement. Others called for diplomatic contact. The debate raged for hours until a new signal arrived. Not from the Astraeus, but from the transformed dreadnought, its captain. A grizzled Cathari veteran with 4 decades of service spoke directly to the council, his voice trembling, not with fear, but with awe. "I came to burn," he said, "and instead I was healed. My ship is no longer a weapon. It is a cradle, and I will not let you undo what has been given." His words tipped. The Scalia vote was called, and for the first time in centuries the council chose not to destroy, but to listen. They sent a message, not a threat, but a request. "We wish to speak." Lyra received it through the moss, the planet itself carrying the words to her like a whisper on the wind. She looked at Cassie. "They are ready." "Are they?" Cassie asked. Not all, she admitted, but enough. Preparations began. Not for war, but for meeting the people of K7X, gathered not in armor but in woven robes. Their faces calm, their eyes bright with purpose. They did not build a stage. They did not raise a flag. They simply opened a path from the surface to the stars. Cassie returned to the Astraeus briefly to retrieve a few items: a datapad, a recording of Earth music, a photograph of her family. She knew she might not come back. Not as a visitor, but as a Bridgevoss met her at the airlock. His expression softer than she had ever seen. "You changed everything," he said. "No," she replied. "You let me." He handed her a small device, a universal translator updated with every known dialect, including the empathic pulses of the Ctheraphore when words are not enough, he said. She nodded. "Thank you," as she boarded the shuttle for the final time. She looked back at the ship that had been her home for so long and felt no regret. Only purpose. The descent was peaceful. The storm gone. The sky clear. The moss glowing and welcome. Lyra waited. At the edge of the clearing, Naya at her side, Ember perched on a nearby stone. Its eyes closed, but its presence strong. "You are ready," she said. Cassie stepped onto the ground and did not look back. Above them, the first envoy ship entered orbit, not a warship, but a vessel of open design, its hull transparent, its engines silent. It carried no weapons. Only observers, scientists, and one very nervous ambassador. They would land at 1000. And this time there would be no smiles at 020. And there would be understanding at 1001, and perhaps something even rarer. Trust in the tunnels below. The people of K7X prepared not to defend but to welcome. They wove light into banners. They sang songs of meeting. They opened their homes to strangers who had once called them monsters. And Cassie stood among them, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as the first thread in a new tapestry between worlds. She looked at Lyra, who placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are one of us now." Cassie smiled, not the smile of a soldier or a scientist, but of someone who had found where she belonged. "Yes," she said, "I am, and far above in the silent dark." The stars watched as two worlds reached for each other, not with fire, but with open hands. The envoy ship touched down at 1000, its landing strut settling into the glowing moss without a sound. Its hull transparent so those inside could see the world they had once feared, and those outside could see the faces of those who had come to learn. The ramp lowered slowly, and a single figure stepped out, an ambassador named Dahlia Ross, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hands that had signed more peace accords than war declarations. She carried no weapon, no data pad, no armor, only a small woven bracelet given to her by her granddaughter as a reminder that every choice ripples through generations. Lyra waited at the edge of the clearing, her silver hair catching the soft light. Naya stood beside her, holding Ember's tail like a child with a favorite toy. Cassie stood a few steps behind, not as a guide, but as witness her presence. a bridge between two worlds that had nearly destroyed each other. Dahlia stopped 10 meters away and bowed her head, not in submission, but in respect. "I come not to speak for my people," she said, her voice clear and steady, but to listen. Lyra studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You are the first who has said that. The meeting did not happen in a chamber or under armed guard. It happened in the open beneath a sky still healing from the scars of war. They sat on smooth stones, surrounded by moss that pulsed gently with each word spoken. No translators were needed. The planet itself carried meaning through vibration, sent through the quiet hum of life all around. Dahlia asked questions not about weapons or technology, but about songs, about how they raised their young, about how they mourned. Their lost Lyra answered not with data, but with stories of roots that remember every raindrop, of caves that sing when the wind passes through, of children who learn to listen before they learn to speak. Cassie watched as understanding grew, not in grand declarations, but in small moments when Dahlia's eyes widened, at the sight of a flower blooming from Ember's breath, when Naya offered her a cup of water, drawn from a crystal spring, and Dahlia drank without hesitation. By the end of the day, a covenant was formed, not written on paper, but woven into the air. Between them, K7X would remain sovereign, its people free to live as they always had, but they would open a single path, a place where others could come not to take, but to learn, and Cassie would stay, not as a soldier, not as a scientist, but as the first liaison between Earth and the Deathworld. She helped build the school on the edge of the upper tunnels where human and Deathworlder children could sit together under bioluminescent trees, learning each other's languages, their laughter mixing with the chime of leaves. Years passed quietly. The Astraeus was decommissioned not as a relic of war but as a symbol of change. It was brought to orbit around K7X, its hull covered in the same glowing moss that once saved it. Commander Voss retired and moved to a small habitat on the moon, where he tended gardens and taught young Thari cadets that true strength lies in restraint. Dahlia returned often each time, bringing more students, more teachers, more dreamers who believed that peace was not the absence of conflict but the presence of connection. One evening, as twin moons rose over the forest, Cassie sat on the ledge overlooking the chasm below. The rivers of light flowed steady, the city hummed with quiet life. Naya, now taller but still young by her people's reckoning, sat beside her, her amber eyes thoughtful. "Why did you stay that day?" Naya asked, her voice soft like wind through reeds. Cassie looked at her, then at Lyra, who stood nearby, teaching Ember to mimic the song of a nightbird, because sometimes, she said, the most dangerous thing in the universe is kindness. Naya tilted her head, confused. "Kindness is dangerous," Cassie replied, "because it asks you to see the other, not as a threat, but as a mirror. And once you see that, you can never unsee it." Lyra turned and smiled, that same quiet smile from 0201, "And that is how change begins," she said. "Not with fire, but with a single choice." Below in the tunnels, children played, their voices rising in a shared song, one part human, one part Deathworlder, a melody that had never existed before. Far above, in the silent dark, ships passed, not with weapons charged, but with open channels, carrying messages of trade, of art, of shared discovery. The dreadnought, once a symbol of war, now served as a nursery, its corridors filled with young ones from a dozen species, learning that strength is not in domination but in care. The council never admitted they were wrong, but they changed their ways quietly, removing the red mark from K7X's chart, replacing it with a single word: home. And on the surface where it all began, a simple stone stood at the edge of the clearing. No inscription, no monument, just a marker placed by Cassie on the first anniversary of the strike that never was. It was not to remember fear, but to remember the moment the universe chose something better. Cassie stood there often, not to mourn, but to hope, because she knew the story was not over, it was just beginning, and somewhere in the stars another ship would one day find another Deathworld, and instead of firing, they would remember the girl who smiled at 0201 and the dragon who turned war into wonder. And they too would choose kindness, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And in that choice, the apex species would not be the one with the sharpest claw or the strongest fire, but the one brave enough to lower its weapon and say hello.